All right, welcome back to the final round here on Yahoo Finance. Miles Upton with you in New York. Again, all three majors lower on today's session. The NASDAQ right now off just 3 points. So basically unchanged there on the tech index. We'll continue to follow the markets as we head towards the week's final closing bell. But today, or right now, it is time for our call of the day. And today we are talking about Rosenblatt Securities' latest note on shares of Spotify, the firm raising its price target to $275 a share. That's up from $190. They maintain their buy rating on the stock. And if we take a look at Spotify shares over just the last couple of months, the stock has nearly doubled from its lows back in early March. The low as the market sold off for Spotify was in the mid one teens. Right now it's a $233 stock. And this is really on the back of what Spotify has done in the last month, a number of acquisitions, many of them focused on the podcast space. In the pre-corona time, they bought The Ringer, which we've discussed on this program. Then they bought the Joe Rogan back catalog for $100 million. And just this week announcing deals with Kim Kardashian West's The Innocence Project, and also Warner Brothers and DC Entertainment. They're going to bring some of the Marvel, or not the Marvel, they'll bring some comic names onto the Spotify platform for podcast development. And Shauna, it's been interesting to watch the market react so positively to news that Spotify is now going to spend quite a bit of money to build out its original podcast space.
Yeah, but I don't think that should be any surprise here, because Miles Rosenblatt was specifically talking about in this the fact that they raised their price target was two things. They were talking about the leverage that it gives Spotify for subscription pricing, and then also future label negotiations. And when you take a look at these deals that Spotify has recently done, some of the ones that you just went through with Joe Rogan, also with The Ringer with Bill Simmons, now with Kim Kardashian West, I mean, this will open doors for new users because those deals are huge. And I think getting names with people with loyal followings is big for Spotify's future user growth. And that's really what the street cares about when you get down to it. And what's interesting here, and why this is a little bit different than what we've seen in the past, is with Joe Rogan. So the landmark deal we have all talked about, he had a massive brand around his podcast. He had a very loyal following. So this is a little bit different when it comes to Kim Kardashian West, because she doesn't have a podcast right now. So Kim's not migrating an existing podcast to Spotify's platform. She's actually starting one. So it's a little less certain just in terms of how big of a hit her podcast will be. But when you take a look at the fact that she has such a brand, she has such a loyal following, Instagram followers, for example, 176 million. So it's a huge potential user base for her podcast. And it shows really the power of her built-in following. And I think that's really what it comes down to when you take a look at the deals that Spotify has inked here over the last several months. So I think the big takeaway is this deal with Kim Kardashian West, the deal with Joe Rogan, the deal with The Ringer with Bill Simmons, all those others in the past, that Spotify has clearly established itself as by far the leader in the podcast space. And this type of content, of course, will give it leverage when it comes to the longer term growth.
Boy, if Spotify has established itself as the leader in the podcast space, Apple's not going to like hearing that. And of course, many other companies want in, many other podcasting platforms. It's so interesting to me, though, you guys. I mean, clearly all of the tech giants and media platforms have agreed for the moment. Podcasting is where it's at. Let's rush in. And as Miles mentioned, I just wrote about this a couple weeks ago. We were talking about this on the show. The Joe Rogan deal, just the latest of many, and a sign of how important this is, not just media companies, but now the tech giants wanting in. And there's that convergence again of tech and media, but the tech companies saying, oh, we're not media companies. Well, sure they are. They increasingly want to own media, be involved in media, but not be seen as media companies. Now, in some ways, this is all kind of weird to me, and it just shows you, different tastes and different strokes for different folks. And, esports is a similar thing. Obviously, the audience is there, but I also think in many ways, esports it's already been proven that it was a bubble. The spending was overblown. Similarly, the podcast boom. I was just talking to a friend about this, and each of us has just 2 podcasts each that we listen to. Even if you, a person, have 4 podcasts that you listen to every week or multiple times per week, I just don't see who has the room or space to listen to more than that. And it's just remarkable how many there are. And of course, every time we have some kind of podcast-related executive on our live shows rolling through, I ask them the same question. Isn't it overcrowded by now? Isn't it flooded? Isn't it too full? And they say, no, it's still nascent. It's still early. It's not overcrowded yet. Boy, if it's not overcrowded yet, it seems like we're going to be overcrowded soon, because no one can listen to all these things. I mean, just the number of podcasts now, even on niche topics. I mean, if you're an NFL geek and you want to listen to one that granularly analyzes football. There's 30 different ones to choose from. How many can you listen to? So it's all interesting. And Miles mentioned the comic book play now, which, by the way, it's DC Comics, very different from Marvel. But as I understand that deal, it's going to be actual comics, but performed, I guess read aloud. And it's sort of strange to try to imagine what that sounds like, crash, boom, you, watch out, ah. So maybe that's cool. I mean, I love the Marvel movies, but there's just so much stuff in the podcast market now, and it seems flooded to me.
Well, I think that if we imagine podcast as a replacement for the radio, and so then it's linear, and then to your point, yes, Dan, there is a time constraint on how much can be consumed, then it might seem crowded. But if we look at, kind of the deals that have been done, and let's take The Ringer out, because I think that's like media, that's news, right? Most of their podcasts are fairly topical. Joe Rogan, that's buying the back catalog. That's thinking that people who are interested in his interviews, he did an interview with, I don't know, I think it was Kevin Hart a couple weeks ago, right? If I want to listen to that interview in 2 years, someone will want to listen to the Joe Rogan 2020 interview with Celebrity X in 2 years' time. And that person is worth investing in for Spotify. Innocence project. Well, that's an evergreen type project. Yes, those are topical things when the Innocence project does get someone out of prison, but they're building on, here's the narrative of this person who was wrongly imprisoned, and here's how it went down. Here are the crooked prosecutors, so on and so forth. DC Comics, we're telling a story. Anyone can listen to that at any time. Now, the opportunity, and Daniel Ek had an interview like 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, where he was saying, my opportunity is all audio. Anything that makes noise, us here, music, people talking on a podcast, that's the Spotify opportunity. And if they are able to leverage, if they're able to look at their market that way, rather than how many people are doing drive time podcasts, how many people are doing daily updates, whether it's the New York Times or ESPN, things like that, maybe those spaces are crowded. But if every person on the earth is your target audience, and you believe that there's a way to change time from this linear, television, radio way that media has thought about things, that you can only watch or consume one thing at a time, and once it's gone forever. I do think that kind of changes the opportunity. Now, again, the stock has doubled. So it was a $20 billion company a couple months ago. Now it's a $40 billion company. Are people too excited about that? Maybe. Rosenblatt is as excited as investors have been, certainly about the direction Spotify has gone. But again, I think in their communications, quarterly letters, and so on, they've outlined how they see this market playing out. And I think it is really interesting, Dan, to hear you talk about it's flooded, but it's flooded for you, but they don't need your ears anymore. They're happy with your ears. It's ears they either haven't gotten to yet or could get to in the future that I think they're really looking at right now. So certainly an interesting company to follow. And again, Rosenblatt maintaining a buy rating and increasing their price target by about 50%, up to 275 from 190 per share.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.